Welcome to A Voice of Reason in Turbulent Times with Pastor Charles Burnett Morrow. A powerful, practical, prophetic, and progressive commentary about what is happening in our world today.
Hi folks, Pastor Charles here. Tommy and I are on the road. We are headed for Nashville for the weekend. We go up every Saturday afternoon. We spend the night generally at the hotel where we're having our meetings right now. And then that way, first thing in the morning, we're able to set up for church, and we have church at 11. We generally go out with church folks and eat afterwards, and then we head back home, hopefully in time for Tommy to do some things and get ready for the following week. I am driving, so as I speak, you're going to ride along with me. I will not be able to look at the camera a whole lot because I need to pay attention to the road, okay? So I'm going to have you just ride with me, and I'll talk to you like you're a passenger in the car. There is so much going on in our country right now, and in spite of the fact that I knew it was coming, and I did know it was coming. I absolutely knew it was coming. It still is very troubling, obviously. You know, it's very heavy and troublesome. One of the things that really has me bugged right now is the failure on the part of the press, on the part of those who are doing podcasts online, and the Democrats, especially those that are in office. The thing that really has me bugged right now is the fact that no one is calling what's happening what it is. Nobody is coming out and plainly saying what they need to say. And what they need to say is, we are in the middle of a coup. Our government is literally being dismantled. I'm going to tell you something, folks. All these people keep speculating as to what Elon Musk is doing with his access to all these computers and all these departments. And I think I can tell you what he's doing. It's called sabotage. What he's doing is he is arranging it so that these systems are going to be shut down. They're going to literally be wiped out. And when these systems become wiped out, there is no chance in the world of our quickly and easily reinstating them. There is no way in the world, even if we had an election in 2028, and the Democrats were to take control of, let's say, the House and the Senate. The fact of the business is Donald Trump is ignoring entirely Congress. What do you see him doing? What do you even see him trying to do by reason of legislation? Nothing. He is doing nothing by reason of legislation. Everything he is doing by executive order, and whether those executive orders are constitutional or not, he's issuing the orders, and then when these matters are taken to federal court, they're ignoring the federal courts. So ultimately, they are trampling on the Constitution. He is making it known, abundantly known, that he despises the Constitution, and secondly, that he despises our justice system, our legal system. Well, when you have someone who is ignoring the Constitution and who hates the legal system, then, my friend, you have a authoritarian dictator. Okay? We are not by any means in any kind of a normal circumstance. Democrats, Cory Booker and Jamie Raskin and all these others, they get on television and they talk on, MSNBC, and they talk to the podcast folks, and they act like things are normal, so to speak. They say, yeah, Trump's doing illegal things, and they're complaining about that. And they're saying, oh, but, we've won in the courts and blah, blah. Well, that's all well and good. It's wonderful that we've won in the courts. The only problem is we have a dictator in the White House who has no interest whatsoever in complying with the courts. Why should he? One of the inherent weaknesses in our government, I've talked about it before, and I've talked about the fact that within our Constitution, unfortunately, there are very necessary things like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, so on and so forth. However, while these things are important, while these things are absolutely necessary, and our founding fathers had lived in dictatorial states, monarchies, where these freedoms were not guaranteed. If you spoke against the king, you could be arrested and put in jail, or killed for that matter. If there was even so much as a hint of a plot to overthrow the king, you could be arrested, and so on and so forth. So these rights and these freedoms are essential, yet at the same time, bad actors are able to come in and use these same identical rights, these same identical freedoms to destroy what our founding fathers have established. I talked about it in previous podcasts. Adolf Hitler was able to worm his way into the chancellorship of Germany. Once he got into the chancellorship, he utilized all legal means. Everything he did was legal. Unlike Trump. Trump's doing many things that are contrary and in contradiction to our Constitution. Well, the problem is Germany had they didn't have our Constitution. Therefore, there were inherent weaknesses within their Constitution. There were inherent weaknesses within our Constitution that Adolf Hitler was able. There's an accident behind me. I think the young man got out. Okay, so there were inherent weaknesses within the German Constitution that are not the same as those in our Constitution. And when you get somebody evil, when you get somebody wicked, someone who is not, as I've spoken about before, who is not acting in goodwill, someone who does not respect the Constitution, who does not respect the rule of law, they can identify the weaknesses and then use those weaknesses to destroy our constitutional republic and replace it with whatever form of government they desire. And of course, virtually every constitution every democracy that has ever existed, when it came to an end, and the average lifespan of a democracy historically has been about 200 years. So we're actually a number of years over our expiration date. Every democracy in history has ended with dictatorship. That, without fail, that is the route that they have taken. That's the route that they've gone. It's never been an organized effort on the part of those in government to simply amend the current Constitution and make whatever changes are necessary, or for that matter, to simply write a new Constitution. And if everybody in Congress and everyone in leadership said we need to write a new Constitution, we need to, they could in effect do that. However, that has never been the way that any democracy in history has ever ended. Without fail, it ends with dictatorship. I think it's imperative that people understand what's happening right now. I want to tell you, this is something I've been thinking about this week. Honestly, if you are white and you're not in a mixed marriage or you're not gay, you're going to be relatively safe during this entire thing, okay? You won't be one of the groups that is targeted by these people. As I've said, if we look at history, we're able to identify, frankly, what is about to happen. And Adolf Hitler went in, he began to deregulate everything, he began to dismantle any agencies that regulated, any agencies that oversaw any aspect of German life. Dictators, what they want to do is they want to be in control of everything. They don't want anyone else making decisions about anything, okay? This is why the Department of Education has to go. This is why the Department of Defense has to go. This is why U.S. aid has to go. Everything has to be dismantled. Everything has to be destroyed. And I honestly believe that Elon Musk is going in, and I think you're going to find out after a little while that they have sabotaged. That's what these people are doing. They're sabotaging the systems. And what they're doing is they're making certain that none of these things can be restored, at least quickly. Even if, and there's no way this is going to happen, even if in 2028 we were able to have another presidential election, even if Donald Trump were out of office and we elected a Democrat, the truth of the matter is, first of all, the Democrats are a bunch of weak as water morons. They don't understand you can't bring a knife to a gunfight. And that's what they keep doing over and over again. They keep bringing a knife to the gunfight. Well, we're going to use the constitutional means to stand against Trump. We're going to use constitutional means. Well, that's all well and good. The only problem is he's not using the Constitution in the least. He doesn't respect the Constitution in the least. One of the inherent weaknesses in our Constitution is there is no way for a bad actor like Donald Trump to be disposed of except for congressional action and an impeachment followed by actual conviction resulting in the removal. At that point, if Congress were to impeach, if the Senate were to convict, at that point, the military could literally go into the White House and physically remove him from office, okay? However, that is not going to happen. The Republicans have been covering Donald Trump's back from minute one. And again, another thing that really irritates me and drives me up the wall is that people in the press, people in podcast world, on the internet, people in government for that matter, continue to view the Republican Party as somehow being afraid of Trump, and somehow or another, they are being held captive, by Trump and MAGA. And the truth of the matter is, from the very beginning, they could easily have removed him after the first impeachment, but they covered his back. They made sure he stayed in office. They could easily have made certain that he could never run for president again had they voted to impeach and convict on the second impeachment based on the insurrection. However, they did not do that. They're not going to do it this time either. They're not going to do it at any point in history. They're not going to do it. And the reason is simple, as I've been trying to explain to people. They have been in on this from the beginning, folks. I prophesied years and years and years. I mean, literally more than 2 decades ago, I began to warn that there was a plan within the Republican Party. The Lord showed me this. I knew it to be so. Said there is a plan within the Republican Party. That doesn't mean that at that time every single Republican in America was in on it. No. There was a plan within the Republican Party. There was a large subgroup, you might say, within the Republican Party that wanted to their first objective was to wrest permanent power. They wanted to make certain that they had permanent power. Secondly, they wanted to dismantle our government, and they wanted to discard the Constitution. The Republican Party as a whole, and I was a Republican for a good part of my life when I first registered to vote. I'm old enough to have been a Republican for a couple of decades, and then I woke up and I left that. But the Constitution of the United States of America does not serve Republican objectives, folks. Let's be honest. Think about it. Everything that they want to do, everything they're trying to do, is contrary to the Constitution. And the justification they have tried to use over the decades is extra constitutional documents. They've tried to claim that, our founding fathers were trying to found a Christian nation. That's a crock of nonsense. That's pure garbage. If our founding fathers had wanted to establish some form of a theocracy, then they could have made it abundantly plain within the structure of the Constitution. They could have made it abundantly plain. However, theocracy and democracy do not mix. You cannot have a government that is influenced by the church and at the same time have a government that is strictly representative of the will of the people. It doesn't work that way, folks. You can't do both. It would have to be one or the other. The fact that our founding fathers went with a constitutional republic, which is a form of a democracy. You know, got all these folks running around saying, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic. Folks, that is ignorance at its highest level. A republic is a form of democracy, okay? So that notion is idiotic. But the fact that our founding fathers decided to go with a constitutional democracy immediately rules out any influence of the church on government. It rules it out. You cannot have both. When you have a theocracy, you also, in effect, wind up with an oligarchy. Why do I say that? Well, if the church has influence over government, which church? Which denomination? Which belief system? Which organization? Which body is going to inform the government as to how policy should read and what should be allowed and disallowed? Which one do we go with? If you go with the Episcopal Church, you're going to have much more liberal, much more social policy, feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, things of this nature. It's sad to me, and I saw this many years ago when I was still young. It is sad to me that the majority of the evangelical community and the fundamentalist community, they actually give very little thought to any form of social ministry. These are the same people who will scream and holler that government shouldn't be feeding people, government shouldn't be housing people, government shouldn't be providing health care for people, because we're the government, the people are the government, and that means you're taking money out of our pocket to do these things, and government shouldn't be doing these things. These things should be handled in the private sector. These things should be handled by charities and churches. Yeah, y'all are saying that, and yet your church doesn't have a pantry. Your church has no structured system whereby they can try to help people and meet needs in the community, or even for that matter, within the church. I've talked about the fact that when I was pastoring my very first church back in the mid-'80s, I developed a system, and everything I do on paper. I put it all on paper. And I developed a system in our church whereby members of the church could go to the man that I appointed head of this ministry. It was called Christian Assistance Ministries, CAM. And what we did is we allotted 20% of our tithe, every tithe that came in. We took 20% of that tithe and we placed it in the Christian Assistance Ministries account. We had a separate checking account for CAM. Everything, it was set up as kind of an independent, self-standing ministry. And we put 20% of our tithe into CAM. If someone wanted to give additional, if they wanted to give an offering for CAM, like if you paid your tithes and you added $10 and said, I want to add this to CAM, then we would obviously put that in CAM as well. And people in our church knew that if they had a need, whatever it might be, if they needed help buying heating oil, if they needed help getting a haircut, if they needed help with groceries, if they needed help with an outfit that they could go out and apply for jobs in and interview in, you know. We had it set up in our community where there were a number of businesses that would accept our gift certificates. We actually had looked like a checkbook, but the checks were in fact gift certificates, and we called them gift certificates. We didn't want people who needed help to feel bad about receiving help, you know. And there are a lot of people in our world who have pride, you know, and self-esteem, and when they have to ask for help from anyone, it makes them very uncomfortable, and they're not real happy about it. They want to be able to do for themselves. They want to be able to provide for themselves, and having to ask for help is difficult. So we did not want to exacerbate this sense of embarrassment that many people go through having to ask for help. So in order to kind of help mitigate that a little bit, we used what we called gift certificates. On the gift certificate, we would put the specific store that they were going to go to, because we had arrangements with specific grocery stores. I went around the community, folks, and I sold this plan to all these businesses. I was 19 at the time. I got grocery stores who said, yes, Pastor, we'll do that with you. And what they did is they would accept our gift certificate, and then they would simply call us. And then Stephen, who I had appointed head over camp, could write out a check and pay the grocery store whatever amount we specifically owed them. We had barber shops that would accept our gift certificates, and men who needed haircuts. Back then, I was quote-unquote old-time holiness, and we didn't believe in women cutting their hair, so we didn't have, you know, a provision for women, sadly to say. But we had it set up so that we could issue a gift certificate to certain salons, certain barber shops. They would accept the gift certificate, call us, and we would pay them. We had arrangements with some thrift shops, and at these thrift shops, you were able to get all kinds of stuff, from clothing to bedding to housewares, you know. So depending on the need and on the gift certificate, we literally we had all the different places. Like, for instance, we had a box for groceries. Then we had a box for haircut. We had a box for clothing. We had a box for household items. And what we would do is we would X out these boxes to indicate exactly what that person was authorized to buy and how much the maximum they could go to was. And obviously we made arrangements with some other stores, retail stores as well, because there were some instances where the thrift shop might not be able to supply what the individuals needed. But if somebody had a house fire and they lost their dishes, you know, and their cookware and all this, we were able to help provide that for them. And then, of course, if there were bigger needs that folks had, they could just let Stephen know, and he and I would go over it. And like, for instance, if they needed a refrigerator, you know, obviously in that instance, we're not able to simply give you, you know, a certain amount of money and send you to, say, Home Depot, you know. But instead, we might be able to find a refrigerator somewhere else. There may be somebody in the church even that has one that they're able to give. And so, you know, we have this entire program set up. I'm not talking about it in order to show you how brilliant I am. That's not what I mean in sharing it. What I'm trying to say is from my earliest days of ministry, I understood that most evangelical churches, which, we were, made no specific provision for these kind of needs within the church, or for that matter, within the community. And by the way, if someone in the church was aware of someone in the community who had a need, they also could come and talk to us on their behalf, and we would help them as well. And if somebody in the community happened to come to us specifically asking for help, we would use CAM to help them as well. So I share all that to say most evangelical churches make no specific provision. There may be those occasions, you might say, where they become aware of someone in the church who needs food, or who needs this or needs that, and they may rally and have a pounding, where they collect canned goods and stuff to give to these people. I'm not saying that they don't ever. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying there was no structured system within the church to actually do these charitable ministries, what is otherwise referred to often as social ministries. And yet, it is the same exact people who make no provision, who don't go out of their way at all to try to minister to people's social needs. It's these same churches that are full of people who say, I don't want my tax dollars going to help feed people. I don't want my tax dollars going to help educate people. I don't want my tax dollars going to help provide health care for people. I work a job. I've got benefits. They can just go out and find a job, and they can get benefits, and they can do what I'm doing, and they can struggle the same way I'm struggling. What a wonderful way for Christians to look at life. What a wonderful way for Christians to look at the world. Personally, I don't have a problem at all with the notion of my taxes going to help people get an education. Anyone who has been through the education process knows that if you're a person of little means, getting especially a higher education is virtually impossible. When I was young, I desperately wanted to go to Bible college. That was my goal. When I left high school, I wanted to go to Bible college. Neither of my parents had been to college. Most of my aunts and uncles had never been to college. I grew up in a family. We lived in southern New England. Back in those days, manufacturing was big in New England, especially anything related to steel and various forms of metal. My father, for instance, worked for a copper mill where they produced a number of copper products, whether it be sheets of copper, copper wire, that's used in electrical wiring and stuff like that. They made all kinds of metal-related, copper-related stuff. We had brass plants, several. We had steel plants. I actually worked for a period of time in a steel plant. As a matter of fact, there was a movie made, and of course I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. I want to say Danny DeVito was in it, but I'm not sure. And it was about a factory that was being shut down, and the people wound up buying it. The employees got together and they bought the company. And anyway, they actually filmed that at the factory that I had worked as a security guard at in Seymour, Connecticut. So manufacturing was huge in our area. If you were an uneducated person, you didn't even have to finish high school, and you could find a job, and it would pay pretty well. Most of these factories were unionized, and so therefore you could not easily and carelessly be fired. You got good benefits. My father used to have, back when I was a kid, my father had some of the best benefits that anybody could have at that time. If you are familiar with, and you know, Blue Cross Blue Shield, for instance, back in my youth, Blue Cross Blue Shield was considered like the premier insurance. If your company offered Blue Cross Blue Shield, holy mackerel, you had the cream of the crop insurance. I don't recall my father ever having to pay a copay on anything. If we kids got sick, my mother took us to a doctor. Never had to worry about taking us to a doctor, never had to worry about any of that. And Blue Cross Blue Shield at that time was just amazing, okay? And so these type of jobs were abundant in New England. They were abundant in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania had enormous steel manufacturing, they had all kinds of manufacturing related to metals and what have you, just like Connecticut did at that time. So, back in the day, people could get good paying union jobs even though they did not have a higher education. It was not necessary. However, we have seen in our country over the last 40 years or so an evolution, and manufacturing in this country has gone down horribly. So we don't do near as much manufacturing in America as we used to do. That has a lot to do with the fact that many manufacturers now are able to go either to Mexico or overseas to China, and they're able to set up manufacturing plants and pay people peanuts. They don't have unions. They don't have to worry about the benefits. So in the long run, they can manufacture the same product, and the profit margin will be 500 times higher than it was, or I should say 500% higher, not 500 times, 500% higher than it was when they manufactured the product in the USA. So we don't have near as many jobs in the U.S. anymore that do not require a higher education. The jobs that we do have in this country that may not require higher education are generally in retail or the service industries. And those jobs pay nothing. And those jobs provide nothing in the way of benefits. So what happens is we wind up with these Republican folks saying, well, these people can go out and get a job like I did, and they can get benefits, and that's how you get health care. That's how it should be done, And they can say that all day, but they're ignoring the reality of America's current economic status. It's just not where we are right now. Most people in America are not college educated. Most. It's not like it's a small segment of the population. No, most people in America are not college educated. I wanted to go to Bible college so bad. When I was a sophomore, I believe it was, in high school, our church youth group took a trip by van down to an Assemblies of God Bible College in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It was called Valley Forge Christian College at that time. And I went on that trip, and I got so fired up. Oh, I got so excited about the idea of going there after high school. I was just convinced that was what I was going to do, and that's what I wanted to do. When I got home from that trip, I remember telling my mother about it, and I was excited. Oh, Mom, they have, every morning they have chapel and blah, 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 Of course, I've learned since then that Bible college can be a whole lot different than what a lot of people think it is. But anyhow, we won't go there. But I was all fired up and I was all excited. And my father was sitting there listening to me. And when I got done, my father looked at me and said, in his classic narcissistic, I know how to pop your balloon every time, no matter what you say or what you do. And he looked at me and said, well, you better be able to pay for it, because I'm sure as hell not going to. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. When you grow up with a narcissist, as I did, and most people outside of the immediate family don't recognize a narcissist. You have to live with them to be able to really fully identify, because narcissists are fantastic actors. They can put on a show like nothing you've ever seen before. When they're around people who are not their family, who are not, related to them or what have you, they can act like somebody completely and entirely different. The only thing that my father was consistent in was tearing down his family every chance he got. Part of the reason that narcissists do this is because they are extremely guarded, and they don't want the truth about them to be exposed. They don't want their family, who obviously knows what they really are, they don't want their family exposing them and talking to people about what they are and how they are. So what they do is they literally will try to discredit and tear down everybody that has the potential of exposing them, okay? I have aunts and uncles, his brothers and sisters, who literally just think my father's an angel. They have no clue. They have no clue in the universe what that man is like in real life. They have no clue. And in recent years, it's been quite a while now, several decades. Time passes so quickly sometimes, But I came to recognize, and I was finally able to face the fact that as a child, my father had molested me. My father. I knew it. I had it in my mind. I knew it, but I couldn't quite bring myself to face it. With the help, of seeing a counselor, because for years growing up, I struggled with debilitating depression. I mean, massive depression. I struggled with that so much of my life. And, people didn't understand. People didn't understand where it was coming from. I've got this wonderful dad. I've got this wonderful mom. We live in this wonderful house. I should be the happiest kid on the planet. No, I did not have a wonderful dad. No, I did not have a wonderful mom. No, I did not live in a wonderful house. I was growing up in a hell that you can't even imagine. And for me to try to explain it to you would be a waste of time. Because honestly, and if you look up narcissism online, watch some videos, watch some psychiatrists and psychologists, especially look up children of narcissists, and they will explain how that the experience of the children of narcissists is so foreign to what most people even remotely experience in life, that the majority of people who hear the child of a narcissist try to explain what they went through, they can't wrap their mind around it. Literally, it's that bad. They literally cannot wrap their mind around it. It sounds so otherworldly, it sounds so surreal. It's like, no, that this must be on him. This must be an exaggeration. This has to be, and so therefore, to be frank and honest with you, I don't really try to explain. I've tried to explain it to Tommy, and he grew up with loving parents. They may have been in a pseudo-Christian cult, however, they still were loving and supportive and kind parents. I had a father who was a control freak, as narcissists are. My mother never went grocery shopping. My father did the grocery shopping. If my father shopped for groceries, we had groceries. If he didn't, we didn't. Many people had no idea. My mother would never talk about it. She would never, ever say anything that made my father look bad. And we would be, my mother and at first two boys, because Michael and I were the older two, and Dallas, my baby brother, didn't come along till I was closer to 10. So for the first several years of their marriage, my mother and Michael and I would sit at the house and literally have nothing to eat. Nothing. Not a bloody thing. And my father would he didn't think anything of doing this. He didn't. But he would buy bags of groceries, go to my aunt's house, and act like he was Santa Claus bringing this great gift. And then he would tell her, well, I bought the ingredients for macaroni and cheese, so how about you make dinner tonight and I'll stay for dinner, And he would literally do that. I found this out years later. I had no idea at the time that he was doing this. And we'd be sitting at home, and my poor mother would be searching through her purse. Literally, folks, looking under the pillows, or the cushions, I should say, on our sofas, trying to find change. She'd look at my father's dresser to see if by any chance he had left any change on his dresser, which generally he did not. And if she could pull together $1 or $2, and I see an old friend of mine is watching, Helen. Helen, you grew up in the same town I did. You knew my father. Michael and I would get on our bikes and we would ride a mile downhill because we lived up in a mountain, or, the mountains in Connecticut are not nearly as high as, say, Washington State or Oregon or, like Colorado, but they're still mountains. And we lived up in a mountain, so the road going to our house was basically uphill pretty much the entire way. The grade would lessen, and get a little higher at times, but it was uphill the entire way to the house. So Michael and I would get on our bikes. We would ride downtown to what used to be at the time Cumberland Farms. We had a little convenience store down basically at the bottom of our road. So we'd go 1 mile. Our house was 1 mile exactly from where you would turn onto the street, to our street. And we'd ride down to the little convenience store that was there, and my mother told us, because we only had so much, money, and we would buy a can of tomato soup and a package of elbow macaroni. And then we would ride our bikes uphill a mile so that my mother could boil up a pound of elbow macaroni and add a can of tomato soup. And that's what we ate. We went through this a whole lot more than anybody could ever imagine. My mother would never, as I say, she would never say anything that exposed my father in any way, shape, size, or form. To hear my mother tell it, her husband was the best husband in the world, he was the best father in the world. She constantly gaslighted us kids, constantly, and tried to tell us that our father loved us and he cared about us and blah, blah, blah. And that the things he did and the things he said, they really weren't what we thought he did and said. I mean, it was a nightmare. And so my mother never said to anybody in our church, growing up as a kid, I don't have any groceries, I don't have any way to feed my kids. That was never said anything. We just had to suffer. We just had to go hungry. That was it. That's all there was to it, because my mother was not going to expose my father. So I say all that to say this. I don't blame the church by any means for not trying to help us, because the church didn't know. And if the church doesn't know, then obviously how can they help? But by the same token, this is why I developed CAM as a young person, Christian Assistance Ministries, so that it was clear to our folks. They knew exactly who they could go to. They knew our policy. They knew that we welcomed them coming to us if they had a need, and that there should be no embarrassment, there should be no shame in having to come and ask for help. And I'm sure that my experience growing up as a kid probably informed the way I did things. Because as I say, I wanted to make absolutely certain that people's needs were met. Going back to my main vein again, we've got an entire party in America that doesn't care the least about the poor, feels like if you're poor, it's because you haven't tried to take advantage of all the great possibilities, all the great opportunities that exist in our nation for anybody who wants to succeed. And they completely and entirely ignore another aspect of life that I am painfully aware of, and that is not everyone's handicap in life is physical. There are so many people in our nation and in the world who have been raised in dysfunctional homes. They have been rewired by reason of an entire lifetime in their youth of being treated certain ways, and in order to survive the circumstance that they were in, their brains literally wind up developing new connections. They literally create new, and again, I've studied this and I've seen psychiatrists talking about this. I know in my own life, I can tell you honestly, I don't deny it to anybody. What I went through as a kid I grew up with PTSD, and most people who grow up with a narcissistic parent do. And there is a literal condition, as it were, within the psychiatric community where they recognize this person is a child of a narcissist with PTSD associated with that narcissistic upbringing. And they'll tell you that when you go through the kind of experience you go through, in order to survive, you automatically, defer to this behavior, or you automatically defer to this thought, or to this, this response. And then as you grow older, you cannot break out of that. You're stuck. No matter who does what, if it even sounds anything like what you grew up with, you automatically you go right to that behavior, right to that thought pattern, right to that response. And there are many people in our society who are poor, who are in a state of constant struggle, who cannot achieve in life. They can't hold a job. They can't do anything constructive. And it is through absolutely no fault of their own. And a lot of times we look at people and we say, oh, he's lazy. That person has no ambition. That may not be the issue at all. That may not be the issue at all. When I was a teenager in Texas, I went through more jobs than most people go through toilet tissue. I went through job after job after job. I would quit one and start another. And you might say, well, that's because you were unstable. That's because you didn't know how to, No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Everything I ever did in my life, everything, was criticized. Everything I ever did in my life was subpar. I couldn't please my father no matter what I did. It didn't matter. I tried so hard. Part of it was I wanted to be a testimony and a witness to him. I wanted to see my father saved. So I would do things and try so hard. I would weed. Like one time I spent an entire day. He had a pet peeve about his flower beds around the outside of our house. And they would grow up with weeds that were 3 feet high. And the flower beds would look horrible and our house would look horrible. And he worked a lot. He was constantly working. He was always doing odd jobs or side work for people. Half the time he was sleeping with women, but that is a whole nother story. But, he was always, quote unquote, working. And so he didn't really spend time at home where he could do maintenance on the flower beds and stuff like that. And then he would complain that we boys, why don't they get out there and clean them up? Why don't they get out there and do it? And so one day by myself, now my brother Michael was not involved. And I believe, I can't remember if Dallas had already been born or not, but anyway, I went out and spent literally the entire day. At this point, my mother was working for a mental health facility for mentally retarded and handicapped people. It was a state facility, and she was working there as a nurse's aide. And I started cleaning the flower beds that morning. My father was at work. I started cleaning them. The afternoon came. My mother worked 3 to 11. The afternoon came. She had to leave for work. She's headed out to work. I'm still working on the flower beds. My mother came home, and I was just finishing up the flower beds. So I literally invested about 14 hours that day. pulling weeds, trying to rake, get everything looking nice, make it, I didn't know what to do with all the weeds that I had pulled and all the junk, that I had removed from the flower beds. And our house set up on a hill, off of the road. The road was here, and then there was like a bank that went up, and our yard was just atop that bank. Well, the bank was steep, and there was really no way you could mow it. The only way you could do anything with it, I guess, would be to go in with a sickle, and cut down all the grass and weeds that grew there. But my father never did that. He just let the bank look like it looked, So my thought was, well, I'll take these weeds and all this junk, and I'll just dump it over the bank. And basically, it'll just be hidden by all the high grass and weeds anyway, so it won't make any difference. I heard my father come home, I think it was the next day, and my mother, I heard her ask him, did you see what Chuck Jr. did with your flower beds yesterday? She said he started that morning, and he didn't finish till after I got home from work. And my father responded, yeah, and you see what the idiot did? He threw all the weeds he pulled and stuff down the bank. He was always going to find the negative, always. And he did it, folks, every single time. I have never once in my life heard my father say, good job. I never once in my life heard my father say, you can do it. I never once in my life heard my father offer a word of encouragement. I kid you not. Pastor, why are you saying all this? There's a reason, folks. I need people to understand. I want people to understand. I've titled my podcast, The Voice of Reason in a Turbulent Time, for a reason. I want people to use their heads. There are people in our nation, there are people in our world who have been emotionally damaged. They have been abused. They have been mistreated. They have been raised in such a way that their wiring has been altered, so to speak. And many times these people wind up becoming highly dysfunctional. They cannot function. They literally have been just messed up for the rest of their lives. Look at what happens to young men and young women who are sexually abused as children. Look at, the lifelong repercussions of that kind of, it can ruin them so that they cannot have a healthy marriage. It can ruin them so they cannot have a healthy relationship. I have members of my own family that, frankly, that's exactly what they experienced. I had a cousin who was molested by a great uncle, and that poor girl, she and I were as close as brother and sister, and that poor girl, for her entire life, she died fairly recently, and she was only a few years older than me, and that poor girl could not function in a relationship. She could not function in a relationship. She got married a guy that worshiped her, adored her, and she just could not. And it all had to do with the abuse that she experienced as a young girl. Well, we need to be compassionate when we see that drunk on the street. We need to be compassionate when we see that person who can't hold a job. We need to be compassionate when we see that 400-pound woman who can't hardly get out of her bed and just lays there all day. And people look at these folks and they say, these people have no value. They offer no value to society. You know, they're worth nothing to our society. And I've heard this from people. I've told you before, I had a man who identified himself as a Republican, told me he was an attorney. I was driving Uber at the time. Told me he was an attorney, was dressed immaculately, you know, obviously he made very good money. And he was probably in his 40s. And we were talking in the car one day, and he literally said to me, if you're sick and you haven't worked hard enough to have a job that offers health care benefits and stuff, he said, then you just need to die. That's what he told me. He said, people like that, they just need to die. He said, they don't offer any value to society. If they had anything to offer, they would have found a job that gave benefits and blah, blah, or they would have gotten an education, or they would have done this and they would have done that. And folks, it took everything in my being not to stop the car on the highway and tell that man to get out of my car. I was livid just listening to this insanity. And I remember thinking to myself, this man's a Nazi. That is exactly the mindset of the Nazi Party. Their whole thought process was, anyone who does not or cannot contribute to society in some constructive way has no value, and therefore they are deserving of being terminated. And I've been trying to warn now for years, I won't say decades. I knew that we were going to have the trouble that we're having now. I knew our country was going to go through, and I still think we are very shortly going to experience a second civil war that is based on race, not based on geography. It's not going to be North versus South. It's not going to be a fight over the issue of slavery. No, this time it's going to be a race war. And we have a man in the White House who is going to rubber stamp and approve and cover for everyone who is a bad actor and who acts on behalf of eliminating the lesser races from our American population. And you may think that's far-flung, you may think that's hyperbole, you think what you want to think, you watch and see it's coming. I've been telling Tommy this for years. I prophesied it 20 years ago in a message I preached in our church in Dallas. Unfortunately, at that time, we weren't videotaping our services. I thought I had it on cassette somewhere, but so far I haven't been able to find it, or else I'd be able to, play it. People could hear it. But I said there is an element in this country. First of all, there is a plan within the Republican Party to discard the Constitution, to dismantle our present government, and to replace it with a new form of government. I've talked about it in previous podcasts. They want to create a hybrid oligarchy / theocracy that is headed up by a figurehead dictator. And you may not realize how much Donald Trump is a figurehead dictator. In his first term, all Mitch McConnell had to do was put something in front of him and say, sign it, and he'd sign it. Trump doesn't know the first thing in the world about governance. He doesn't know the first thing in the world about the Constitution. He doesn't know the first thing in the world about economics. He doesn't understand the first thing in the world about society. The man is as ignorant as a brick. And therefore, all they had to do was say, hey, see this? We want you to approve this judge. Doesn't matter that they have never even so much as stood in a courtroom and argued a case. Doesn't matter. We want them. They'll be a sycophant. They're going to help rubber stamp every Republican agenda idea that we put forth. And so therefore we need them. And he appointed more judges in his first term than any president up until then had ever appointed. And the majority of them were so unqualified it wasn't even funny. And yet the Senate approved them. And the president put them, he nominated them. And people don't realize, they still want to believe that the Republican Party is somehow, being held captive and they're afraid of Trump. No, they're not, folks. My God, no, they're not. This is a plan they have had in place for decades. Why do you think they have agreed with and supported and rubber stamped every single thing Trump ever has wanted to do? Why do you think they have not tried to stand in opposition to anything? Right now, he has appointed a man to a fictitious position as part of a government organization that does not exist. Doge does not exist, folks. Somebody needs to wake up and smell the coffee and realize what's going on in this country. Doge does not exist. In order for a cabinet level position of that nature to exist, it has to be approved by Congress. Now, Trump, if he had any interest in the universe, in following the Constitution, which he does not. He has no use for the Constitution. The Republicans have no use for the Constitution. If he had wanted to follow the Constitution, he could easily have gone to Congress on his first day and said, listen, guys, I want to create a Department of Government Efficiency, and I want a cabinet level position, blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to tell you right now, they control the Senate, they control the House, and most Democrats wouldn't have seen that as being some big evil thing, okay? You want to create a department that's going to help to look into things and make sure everything is efficient. That makes sense. I have no doubt in the universe that he could have easily gotten full support from Congress and the Senate for this position. Then Congress has to they have to allot funds for this office and for this position, for this department, because people that work within this department are obviously going to be government employees. Therefore, they need to be paid. And they allot, a budget for this department. None of this has gone on. None of this. We have a private citizen, the richest man in the world on top of everything else, running ramshot through our various government organizations. He is informing entire departments that they no longer have a job. Tens of thousands of people are being fired. His idiot worshipers, and for those of you that don't appreciate the fact that I say idiot, well, I'm sorry. I'm going to say it the way I see it. They worship him. Oh, he is streamlining government. He, bless God, yes. He is saving us so much money. He's getting rid of unnecessary blah, blah, blah. And you know what? The same foolish people, I'm going to try to be nice, the same foolish people who are worshiping him for what he's doing, they don't even know what these departments do. People were cheering because he got rid of U.S. aid. Oh yeah, this is money going to other countries. This is money helping black countries down in Africa so they can dig wells and so they can feed people. Yeah, but that was only part of what they did. And the total budget for that department is less than 1% of our total national government budget. Why on earth would you go to the smallest department that acts on behalf of our nation in order to put forth an image of goodwill and charity? We're the richest nation in the world. We're the most powerful nation in the world. And all we're spending, all we're giving to help the poorest of the poor in the world is less than 1% of our overall budget. But somehow Donald Trump and Elon Musk saw this little teensy pin dot of an organization within our government as being the most important one to get rid of immediately. No, Donald Trump's not a racist. No, Elon Musk, his little Hitler salute, that wasn't a Hitler salute, idiot. Yes, it was. There are entire groups of people in our country who are neo-Nazi. There are entire groups of people in our country who regularly use that salute, folks. There are entire groups in our country who want to establish a Fourth Reich. For all we know, Elon Musk is part of one of those groups. Nobody in their right mind would have done that routine. And don't tell me, oh, it was just an accident. It was because when I'm trying to say my heart goes out to you, why on earth would you say my heart goes out to you? You say my heart goes out to you when you're acknowledging that someone is suffering or someone is in distress. That's when you use the term, my heart goes out to you. Not when you have a bunch of supporters who are screaming and hollering, yay, yay, we love everything you're doing. Oh, my heart goes out to you. Why? Why would you say that? Doesn't make any sense. The name of my podcast, folks, is Voice of Reason in Turbulent Times. Let's use a little common sense here. Let's use a little reason, okay? I'm going to try to shut this down pretty quick. We are in the midst of a coup, literally. Our government is being dismantled. It is going to be permanently disabled. Watch. Elon Musk is sabotaging the computer systems that he has been given access to. I guarantee you that's what they're doing. There is no department that he is genuinely the head of because the department has not been created. He has not been salaried as an employee of the federal government. None of the young people that he's brought in, expert computer hackers, people who easily can go in and put a bug in a system that's able to shut the entire system down, and for that matter, destroy it so that it can never be revived. Even if we had an election, which is, I doubt it all is going to happen, in 2028, and a Democrat were appointed, they are doing things in such a way that nobody is going to be able to go in and reestablish these departments and get everything back up and running in any kind of short order. No. What they're doing is they are setting it up so that in the end they can hold our nation captive, hold us as if in effect we were kidnapped, because they're going to be able to say, we have wiped out all of this. None of this can be restored quickly. None of this it would take years. My God, it would take years to try to establish new systems for the Department of Energy, for the Department of Defense, for the Department of Education. It would take years for all these things to be restored. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm waiting to see it, if Trump doesn't wind up, and let's watch and see, we'll see if I'm right or wrong, selling the buildings that these departments, he's not going to keep these buildings. He's going to sell them. When you sell them, now again, if someone wanted to restore any of these things, even at a much smaller level, they're going to have to create all new buildings or rent all new space. It would be so costly and so time-consuming and so difficult for any of these things to be restored that people are going to simply accept the fact that, well, we've got a dictator and there ain't a thing in the world we can do about it. Because even if we could change it, how are we going to fix at this point everything that's broken? You can't. Folks, we're in the middle of a coup. You need to be aware of that. I'm going to repeat once again. If you're white, you're not in a mixed marriage, you're not gay, then you're probably going to be safe. You're probably going to be fine. Because just like the Nazi Party, this party is all about race. That's why he's trying to purge the nation of brown people. And believe me, black people are next and gay people are next. Hitler did it the same identical way. If you look at some of my earlier podcasts, I literally read from history exactly how Hitler turned a democracy into a dictatorship. And it literally took him 53 days. He did not declare himself to be Führer immediately. He actually he had it all done, everything that needed to be done for him to do this. Everything was done in 53 days. However, he waited a little while, and when the President Hindenburg died, that is when he declared himself to be Führer. So you need to understand, I've talked about inherent weaknesses within our Constitution. Do me a favor, put in your phone the hotel, because I need the GPS. I just want to make sure. Sorry about that. If you look at what Hitler did, literally, Donald Trump from day one, from his first term, replacing the judges, appointing all the sycophant judges, that's exactly what Hitler did. Getting numerous news outlets that were owned by wealthy people who supported him to give him all kinds of positive press, that is exactly what Hitler did. Dismantling organizations and quote-unquote bureaucracy within the German government, that is exactly what Hitler did. demonizing one group of people and claiming that they're the cause of our ills and they're the cause of all our troubles in this country. That is exactly what Hitler did. Folks, this man is following Hitler's playbook. He follows it in so many ways, it's scary. One of my podcasts, I went through a number of quotes from Adolf Hitler. And as you read these quotes, you literally can see where Donald Trump has been following that advice from the first minute he announced he was running for president. Quote after quote after quote from Adolf Hitler. And it looks like, my God, this must be where Donald Trump got a playbook so he could understand how to run his campaign. See, the sad thing is, Germany was in very similar economic conditions as we are now when Hitler rose to power. He rose to power using the same identical promises that Trump has been using. I said, as a matter of fact, I have it on Twitter. I put a message out the day after the election. I actually wrote it that night, and I said, "All right, folks, here's what we're looking forward to. Here's what's going to happen." And I said, as part of that post, I said, "Do not be surprised when Trump starts talking about taking over Canada and/or Mexico." And I went even further than that, and I guarantee you, watch, it's going to happen. I went even further. I said, for that matter, they will use the argument that America would be much safer if we did not have the Mexico-U.S. border, and if we did not have the Canada-U.S. border. If the United States of America occupied the entirety of the North American continent, we would be so much more able to guard our border, because look at the border between North America and South America. It's a very small area. It'd be extremely easy to establish security at that border. Basically, it's the southern border of Mexico. They're going to claim that it would be to our advantage in terms of security. They're going to claim it would be to our advantage in terms of resources. Already, I was shocked at how quickly Donald Trump started talking about Canada. I couldn't believe it. I told Tommy, I said, I knew it was coming, but I never dreamed in a million years he'd be talking about it so soon. I thought for sure he'd wait maybe a year or two, into his term. I thought he'd wait a while. No. That man no sooner got sworn in than all of a sudden he's talking about conquest. He's talking about adding territory to our country. Folks, that is exactly what Adolf Hitler did. Talking about buying Greenland. People need to wake up. And those of you that are Christians, you especially need to wake up. Because we tend to think a lot of times no one would ever allow another Hitler. No one would ever allow another Adolf Hitler. That no country could be stupid enough, no people could be foolish enough to allow for another Hitler. Well, we found out real quick that isn't so. And furthermore, there are people who say You know, after history taught us the lessons of Hitler and blah, 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 there is no way in the universe. I forgot to get the trailer. We're going to have to get the trailer. There is no way, put that in, would you? There's no way in the universe another Hitler could arise, you know, in our world, because, I mean, after everything we've learned, you know, there's just no possible way. And the Word of God tells us, folks, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against spiritual wickedness in high places, against the rulers of darkness of this world. The Word of God tells us that in the last days, evil men shall wax worse and worse. If you believe the Bible, then you need to understand that we actually have the potential for someone worse than Hitler. Because evil men shall wax worse and worse. The Bible tells us this. It warns us of this. Folks, it's time to wake up. You need to understand what's happening. Not so that you can be fearful, but so you can be prepared. Especially, I've been warning people, especially if you're a minority, especially if you're LGBT. If you can arrange now for a potential exit plan, then you need to do that. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying you necessarily have to rush out of the country today or tomorrow. But what I am saying is there may come a time when it becomes abundantly obvious that you need to get out of Dodge. And if that be the case, you don't want to wait till then to have to look into what do I need to do to go to Canada, ask for asylum, or what do I need to do to go to, you know, wherever. I actually have family members who are literally looking into, and straight family members for that matter, who are looking into going to, I think one of them was talking about Costa Rica. And I've heard people talk about everything from Mexico to Brazil. And there are South American countries that are pretty stable, and that would be a good potential, place for folks to seek refuge. But I'm not at all trying to make people scared. I'm not trying to encourage you to be terrified, but I am trying to encourage you to be prepared. Just do a little research, get online, see what you would have to do, because there are specific rules, just like in any country, there are specific rules. For instance, if you were to go to Canada, you cannot load up a U-Haul with all of your belongings and drive over the Canadian border and ask for, refugee status. You can't do it. They have specific rules. You literally have to go in basically empty-handed. They don't want you carrying anything in. If you're going to ask for asylum, if you're going to ask, to be designated a political refugee, you have to fly in, literally, you have to, by plane, you have to fly in. When you get off the plane, then you're literally able to ask one of the agents, tell them, I want to apply for asylum. I am a political refugee. Okay, that's just one little hint for you. So you need to look into, if you're thinking about some other country, you need to look into now the rules so that you can know exactly what you're going to need to do. If you do not have a U.S. passport, you need to get one and get it fast, as quickly as you possibly can. Take a day off from work if you have to. I'm not joking, folks. Y'all can, listen, I've been in this for too many years to worry about what people think of me. I'm not joking. This situation is beyond dire. It is way past dire. We are in a desperate situation, and things are going to get worse by the day. And on top of everything else, everything that Donald Trump is doing in the name of quote-unquote efficiency, he's not doing it to pay down our debt. Donald Trump, honey, that man, all he knows how to do is create debt. He doesn't know how to pay down debt. Donald Trump has never in his life had a reputation for paying down debt. No. He ran his casino in New Jersey into almost $2 billion worth of debt, and then proceeded to declare bankruptcy. That's what Donald Trump does. He's not interested in paying down the debt. What he is interested in doing, my friend, he is interested in quote-unquote saving all this money so that in the end he can line his own pockets with it. Your tax dollars, just like the former dictator in the Philippines, Marcos, just like Castro, just like Putin, every one of these people, every dictator in history has wound up lining their pockets with the people's money, sending their people off to unnecessary and obscene wars. That's coming, folks. If you've got young people, if you've got kids that are high school age, just about to graduate from high school, there is a reason why the Word of God says in the last days, woe unto them that give suck in those days, meaning those that have infants, said that it is going to be a time that is so difficult that people with children, people who are trying to care for families, God help them. God help them. And I'm telling you, this man is going to wind up. I had a dream a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to finish up. Once I get on a roll, I tend to just keep rolling. I had a dream, well, actually, it's been, a couple months ago, I guess now, where, I see, look at this nut, my heavens. Don't you love when people are turning a right turn and they come to a stop and then they go half a mile an hour making the turn? That's why I just had back there. I had a dream a little while ago, and in that dream, I saw Donald Trump. He was actually making a speech in front of a whole bunch of people. Yeah, I guess it's going to stay open. Okay. And then I was on a beach, and it was beautiful. The water was coming in. It was a lovely scene. And all of a sudden, I mean, it was like this. All of a sudden, I saw the entire horizon from one end to the other covered with warships, battleships, aircraft carriers, sea-to-land vessels that were literally coming to the beach, landing and unloading tanks and personnel carriers. In other words, I saw our shore being invaded. And what the Lord said to me was, he said, Donald Trump is alienating the United States from not only so-called enemies, but also from allies. He said, this man is so foolish, he thinks that it's a good policy for the United States of America to stand alone in the world. We don't need anybody. Adolf Hitler said, any alliance that is not for the purpose of war is stupid. He said, you don't make alliances with other countries under any circumstances unless you're fighting a war and you need them to help you. That was, according to Hitler, that was the only time that any alliance was necessary. Gee, wouldn't that explain Trump wanting to get out of NATO? Wouldn't that explain Trump getting out of the Paris Accord? Wouldn't that explain Trump trying to alienate us from even our own allies? And what the Spirit of the Lord showed me was, because I told you I already had a premonition about Canada and Mexico both. I think he's ultimately going to try to invade them both. The only difference is he wants Canada and he's willing to absorb their people because the majority of Canadians are white. But when it comes to Mexico, he will simply exterminate every Mexican he lays eyes on. And it would just be a matter of, we need the land. We need the land. We need the resources. He's not going to give a fly about the people whatsoever. And you say, oh, Pastor, that's so insane. That's so far-fetched. Why, who on earth could be so evil as to do that? What do you need? What? Oh, yeah, back. All right, I'm sorry. I'm backing up now to hook up my trailer. We have to pick up a trailer every weekend that has all our church stuff in it. And then we carry it to the hotel and we unhook it so I can use my truck to go eat and things like that. And it has all our church supplies and everything. So, we have to take everything out on Sunday morning, set it up. Then after the service, we have to break it down again. Anyway, folks, listen, you need to start using reason. You need to start using logic. You need to start looking at things realistically. Who on earth can literally walk into department after department after department and tell thousands of people, you have no more job, you're fired, you're done? And on top of that, in order to justify all these firings, he does what my father used to do. He demonizes everybody. If he wants to do them dirty, he starts talking about, how bad they are and how wicked they are and how evil they are and how they don't do right. And that becomes the justification. We've got Trump saying that thousands of people who work in these bureaucratic organizations, they're all bad people. They're all wicked people. They're all blah, blah, blah. Literally, we've been hearing this if you're paying attention. This is what he's saying about 10,000 people. All of those 10,000 people are wicked, terrible, horrible people. And at the same time, this man doesn't give a crap about putting these people out of work. He doesn't give a fly about people losing their benefits, losing their income. He doesn't care if they can pay their mortgages. He doesn't care if they have a loved one who is being treated for a serious health condition. He doesn't care if they're supporting a mother who's in a nursing home facility because she has Alzheimer's. He doesn't care about any of these things, folks. Who can do that? How evil does someone have to be that you can simply go in, demonize people, and then turn around in the next breath? Well, booby, Tommy, quit doing that. He's jumping on the. Oh, I can't move because. You see, sorry, folks. But how evil must somebody be to be able to do this, people? Think about it. And I said in one of my earlier podcasts, and I wish people would understand this because this is a truth that is absolute. I've seen it so many times. If he'll do it to you, he'll do it to me. What I mean by that is, if he will recklessly, carelessly, thoughtlessly compassionately go in and just wipe these people out, he's not going to think anything of embracing policies that are going to cost people their lives. Look what he did with COVID. Look at the game he played with COVID. That was legal genocide. And by the way, I said, before Trump went into office the first time, I said, watch, they are going to embrace policies at every opportunity that is going to amount to legal genocide, meaning thousands of people will die, but they'll be able to claim, well, it was just in response to policy. They're not admitting that we did this on purpose. We knew exactly what we were doing. We knew that tens of thousands of Americans who were disabled, who were elderly, who were sick were going to die because, after all, those were the people most at risk with COVID. So it wasn't like healthy, people that were strong and young were dying. No. It was just older people primarily, people with serious health conditions, the disabled. Those were the people who were winding up dead. The Nazis put folks in gas chambers. They're not going to do it that way this time. This time, they're simply going to employ policies that are going to result in the death of God only knows how many people. Watch. When they talk about cutting Medicare, when they talk about defunding Medicaid, all of these policies they know are going to wipe people out. But who are going to be affected by these policies? Use your head for a minute, folks. The elderly, the disabled, the sick. Those are the very people that the Nazi Party had no use for. Those are the very people that the new Nazi Party has no use for. And if you think for a minute that MAGA is not the new Nazi Party, you're out of your mind. If you notice, listen to Donald Trump talk. He always talks in terms of MAGA. He doesn't talk about Republican. He doesn't talk about being a Republican. No, he doesn't say, oh, well, that person's a Republican and they're real supportive. No. I heard him the other day. I forget who he was talking about, but he said, she's MAGA and blah, blah, blah. And you listen to him. He constantly refers to MAGA as though MAGA is the party. That's not the party. I didn't see an M next to his name on the ballot when I went to vote. Did you? But you see, they're creating a new Nazi party is what they're doing. The original Nazi party was a minority party. They were very small initially, and they were considered to be extremely extreme. And people looked at them like they were extreme. People looked at Adolf Hitler like he was a clown. They tried a coup, and it failed. And Hitler wound up in prison for a period of time. While he was in prison, he wrote the book Mein Kampf, meaning My Struggle, which was his treatise, which was basically what he used to sell his ideas to the German people ultimately. And then, when he got out of prison, Hitler said, it is a recorded historical quote. He said, if you don't like the rules, use every legal means you can to get into a position of power and then change them. That's what he did. That's exactly what he did. He didn't like the whole democracy that Germany had. So what he did is he through the course of years, patiently worked his way through the system. And then finally he was able to get some oligarchs in Germany, because, by the way, another little trick he did was surround himself with oligarchs. He surrounded himself with ultra-wealthy people, promising them very lucrative contracts with the government if they would support him. And these people pressured the president, von Hindenburg, to appoint him chancellor. He did not want to do it, and he resisted it for a very long time. He knew Hitler was dangerous. He knew it. But all these oligarchs, all these people, hold on one second. What?
I need some help.
What's wrong?
The locks are jammed. I can't get them off.
Oh, hold on. Okay. I probably need to.
No, don't move. I think that's what caused the problem.
I just backed up a little.
That's not the problem.
Try it. I just watched the tire move. Try it. Sorry, folks. Anyway, I'm going to have to finish up. I've been talking for 2 hours. I'm sorry. I'm trying to tell you, folks, that what's happening is by no means unplanned. What is happening is by no means without structure. They know exactly what they're doing this time. Project 2025 put it on paper. They know exactly what they're doing. There is no question. And they are systematically going through the list. And when it is finished, I'd be surprised if it takes a year. When it is finished, we will have a full-blown dictatorship. And just like Trump issued a memorandum recently telling employees at the White House that the word felon was not to cross their lips, that they could no longer use the word felon anywhere in the White House or on the White House ground. Can you imagine a president of the United States telling people what vocabulary they can use, what words they can use? People, this man is so dangerous, it's not even funny. And I started, before Tommy distracted me and I got lost, I started telling you about this dream where the country was being invaded and there were thousands, I mean, my God, it was amazing. Thousands of ships and helicopters coming in, aircraft coming in. I saw all this stuff coming to our shore, and I'm like, Lord, what on earth is going on? And the Lord spoke to me and he said, Donald Trump thinks that America is so powerful that it can stand alone. We don't need anybody. We've got nuclear capability. Man, we can threaten because he's a bully. He knows how to bully. Says we've got nuclear weapons. We can bully anybody. You know, we can tell them what we want them to do, and they're going to do it because, bless God, if they don't, I have the ability to nuke them. And you watch, he's going to use that justification when he goes into Canada, because he will militarily go into Canada. Watch. And he'll use that we can go in and quickly do this. We can go in and easily. You realize the population of Canada is 10% of the population of the United States of America. You realize the military in Canada is nowhere near capable, just like Ukraine and Russia. There's no way they could resist us alone. But what the Lord showed me was, when I saw all this happening, he said, Trump's talking about pulling out of NATO, but if and when he tries to go into Canada, he's going to literally be fighting World War III. This man is literally going to start World War III, because we will then be opposed by the entirety of NATO. All the NATO countries will come to Canada's defense. And for the first time in history, America will have a war on our own soil, a world war that reaches our own soil. 2 of the NATO countries have their own nuclear capabilities, folks. We're not the only country in the world that has nuclear, and Russia's not the only other country, and South Korea is not the only other country that has nuclear capabilities. And if you think some of those countries wouldn't be happy to jump on the bandwagon to help wipe out the United States, which they have hated for decades, for generations, if you think some of our greatest enemies wouldn't be happy to ally themselves all of a sudden with the NATO nations because they hate America. You know the old saying, your enemy, your enemy is my friend. You know, if they share enemies with us, then they're going to be more than happy to help fight on behalf. Okay. All right, I need to go. I think Tommy is having some trouble, and for some reason he can't get this thing undone, so I'm going to have to go. Folks, I hope I've said something that has you at least thinking, so that as things go on now, as you see things happening, I hope you're going to use a little bit of reason, a little bit of logic, a little bit of common sense, and understand what is in fact happening, okay? That is my purpose, that is my goal, to try to bring some sort of a voice of reason in these turbulent times. Till we see you again, God bless you in Jesus' name.
Voice of reason in turbulent times with Pastor Charles Burnett Morrow. Speaking truth at a time when truth is in short supply.
We really need your help. By liking and sharing our videos and posts, you can help us get our message out to a far wider audience. So please, if you appreciate our message and are willing to help us be far more effective in reaching a wider audience, like and share our videos and posts. Thank you for your assistance.